excited for today's event. This is our one of our final webinars for the entire year, which is kind of crazy to think. But if you're here in the audience, let us know where you're joining from. Let us know what role you're in as well, because that'll help us kind of guide the conversation and some of the questions that we're going to ask today. But we're super happy to have all of you here, and we are especially happy to have Serena with us. So it's going to be an awesome conversation. Um, any of you who are here today, you are here for closing the year strong, year-end wins, and 2026 pipeline prep. So this is going to be a great conversation. I know a lot of us are in Q4. We're kind of closing those end-of-year deals, but we also have to pivot and think about next year already too. So this is a crazy, very stressful time for so many of us, and we're going to dig into this conversation. My name is Alexine Moudawar. I'm CEO of Women in Sales. We are the largest global community for women in the field of sales. And we are super excited to host this event and to partner with ZoomInfo. So Serena, if you can introduce yourself as well as ZoomInfo for anybody who might not know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Serena Wing. I'm an SMB sales manager here at ZoomInfo. If you're not familiar with ZoomInfo, we are a go-to-market intelligence platform. What that means is we help you find your customers. So we help you understand which companies you should be talking to, when you should talk to them, what you should say to them, and then helping you get in touch with those folks.
Amazing. Super happy to have you here. And I'm going to also drop a link in the chat here for everyone to check out an interactive demo from ZoomInfo. You know, if you want to learn more, if you want to start using ZoomInfo, we're big fans over here. So just drop that in the chat, and that'll be available throughout the entire session today. So yeah, keep letting us know where you're joining from. Keep letting us know what roles you're in today, so that can help us through this conversation. And lastly, we have a Q&A tab. So if you have questions, rather than putting them in the chat because we might lose them, if you can drop those into the Q&A tab, that would be amazing. So we can double back to all of those towards the end of today's conversation. But we're going to dive right in. So Sarita, tell us about your career journey up to today. And, you know, specifically, I think it'd be interesting to also set the stage by learning a little bit about your leadership style as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, like many people, I did not spend my childhood wanting to become a salesperson when I grew up. A lot of us kind of stumble into it and end up loving it, which is totally true for me. But I actually studied international relations when I was in college, and then I spent some time traveling abroad before I eventually realized that I did actually need a way to make money and, some type of a career path. So that's how I ended up starting my sales career. I started out as an SDR at a company that sold PPE, so like safety gloves and safety glasses, and we were selling that into the industrial space, which was actually a great way to learn some foundational sales skills. Like, surprisingly, it actually had a lot of similarities to tech sales, and kind of helped me get my foundation set up. And then I started here at ZoomInfo as an account executive in 2018. Became a manager about 3 years ago. And I would describe my leadership style as very process oriented and data driven. That's just the type of person that I am. But I'm very hands on. We do a lot of team selling here at ZoomInfo. So I work really closely with my team, to help them strategize on deals, help them find and progress new opportunities. And, I'm as close as I can to my sales team.
Absolutely love that. And I'm just checking out the chat. We have people from all over. We have Colorado, Massachusetts, Illinois, Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee. So tons of great people, tons of great titles, and total mix between ICs and leaders that are here with us today, which is amazing. So that'll be perfect because we're talking about both sides. So we know where we are in the year. Both of us are feeling it. We're at the end of, we're heading into our final month, or we're in it now, really. And 2025 is coming to a close really quickly. So I would love to hear from the leadership side how you're coaching your team right now. I actually did a post this morning talking about how I'm sure you've noticed this too, but at this month, every single year, everybody starts posting X number of selling days left in 2025. And I do the same post every single year talking about how sellers know exactly how many selling days are left in 2025. So I would love to hear from you about how you're talking to your team, how you're coaching them right now, and what your reps are really focused on most now that we're at this end of year push.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's funny. I did see your post and I was like, yep, I remember like being a seller, and it's like, you all, yes, I know exactly where I'm at to quota. I know exactly how far I have to go, but thanks for the reminder. But yeah, in December, I mean, our top priority obviously is closing as much business as we can this month. And, we really try to drive urgency with any new leads and opportunities and demos that are coming to us. But we also spend a lot of time at this time of year focusing on going back to our, prior opportunities, any engagements that we had earlier in the year, all the folks that we've spoken to throughout 2025. We are, trying to figure out how we can, yes, we got to keep our activity high, but how can we be strategic and figure out, which of those prior engagements does it make sense to try to go back into and see if there could be some end of year opportunities. So this is when we really hope that, you put good notes in the CRM and you said that person said you should follow up with them towards the end of the year. But yeah, December is really a mix of, putting a lot of effort into closing our new deals. And, again, I'm in small business sales, so we do have quick, a little bit of a more transactional sales cycle. So that's going to look different for some of the folks in the audience, depending on who you sell to. So, it's a mix of those new deals, but this is also our most fruitful month for running successful re-engagement plays. This is the time when we get a lot of people coming back to the table because everybody's doing the same thing. They're planning what their strategy is going to be for next year. And so it is usually a good time to entertain conversations with us again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of companies who have kind of a little residual budget where they are often, at a point where they need to use it or lose it before the end of the year. We're in a lot of those conversations right now too for the exact same reason. Companies that asked us to reach back out, companies that wanted to re-engage down the road. And now we have several of those who are actively in the funnel working through, towards contracting because they had some budget remaining. And so these are really good opportunities towards this time in the year to re-engage. And I think it's important to talk about that too, because a lot of times, we think about, not more net new, not re-engaging. But I think this is a good time of year for that. So we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about some of the strategies sellers can use to drive urgency with deals right now without harming the relationship. So we know that a lot of the kind of word out there is that we should be kind of pushing deals forward, trying to get things through the pipeline, but we also don't want to sever any of those relationships that we've built, and we don't want to ruin potential relationships down the road. So how do you teach your team about balancing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is a tough line to walk at this time of year for sure. When there's pressure coming down, on everybody from leadership to close out the year. But I think, the first step to being able to have the right to drive urgency in like a not tacky way is we have to make sure that we understand our prospects buying process. Because,
Mhm.
if we have the knowledge up front that their CEO is already on vacation in Mexico until 2026, we're going to look silly if we're trying to push to close that business this year. So, step one is making sure that as early on in our conversations with our prospects, we have a good understanding of how decisions are made in their organization. And so one kind of just like tactical tip for that I'm always practicing with my team is something as simple as just managing the clock when you're doing a demo with a new prospect. I always tell my team, you have to have at least 10 minutes saved at the end of that conversation to talk about next steps, to understand what their internal process is going to look like. If you run out the clock, just showing them your product and talking about features, and then, you've got 1 minute left, it's going to be hard for you to understand if you can close that deal this year. So saving that time is really important. But, if we do have an understanding of their buying process and, we feel that we can, potentially go for a close on that, we then have to kind of frame, what are the benefits to the customer? So, we talk a lot about driving positive business outcomes for our clients. Can we frame it in a way that they are going to see some type of a positive business outcome if they start with us now? We're selling sales software. So, if they onboard with ZoomInfo in December, can we actually help them close out their year on a better note?
Mhm.
If we understand more about their sales process and, what kind of seasonality is in their business, that can help us, because if we know that December is usually a slower time of year for them for whatever reason, well, then I'm going to frame it as it's a great time to do training and onboarding for ZoomInfo. If I know that my prospect is going to be really busy in December trying to close their own end of year deals, well, then I'm going to frame it as like, hey, maybe there's signals and data in ZoomInfo that could help you close some of your own end of the year deals. So, really all of this stuff about driving urgency, it all starts with just having a really good understanding of your prospect's business and, their internal processes.
Absolutely. And tying to their outcomes versus just pushing our own timelines, because we love to think about our own quotas and the fact that those are wrapping up at the end of December, but that actually doesn't mean anything to our prospects, and they aren't on the same timelines and they don't have the same objectives as us. So I think that is so critical. And where we're going to head next, I think feel free to pitch ZoomInfo a little bit here, because I feel like it's a really natural place. But would love to hear for your team specifically some of the triggers that you're looking for in deals that you feel like could close before end of year, and definitely speak to ZoomInfo's technology in this as well.
Yeah, totally. And I'll start with kind of just like, basic, not ZoomInfo related stuff. But, if you do have the fortune of getting inbound leads or meetings sent your way, you know, if you're having that first meeting right away with the owner, the CEO, or the president of the company, that's kind of the first thing I'm looking for. Is I know I probably have my economic buyer and decision maker, right from the start. That's a deal where I'm, probably going to be primed to try to press them for a quicker close because I know I already have the right person in the room. And this has kind of been, I saw this floating around on LinkedIn a little bit recently, but like I've been using this tactic for years. One of my sales leaders came up with this a really long time ago. I mean, I don't know who came up with it, but it's the question, hey, would it be crazy for us to earn your business this month? I love to ask that because, we're acknowledging up front, hey, it might be crazy. It totally could be crazy. And it's okay if they say that it is. So I think that removes some of the pressure from the conversation, and it can help your prospect open up about their buying process in a way that's a little bit more natural than us having to be like, hey, what's your buying process? How are you going to buy this? What do you need to do next? I think it's just a really simple question that my team loves to use in December to get a good understanding of what's going on. But kind of moving on to like the ZoomInfo side of things, using our own product and drinking our own champagne, we are going to look in ZoomInfo for, signals that could mean a company is working on their sales strategy for next year. If I see that they have open sales positions on their website right now, that is like almost a surefire sign that, they're planning on how to equip their team next year. If they're hiring new people, those people are going to need tools to do their job. If, those people don't have an existing book of business and they're coming in, they're going to need a way to get, data and information on their prospects. If I see that a company is, all of a sudden they hit the ZoomInfo website 3 times this week and we've never spoken to them before, again, I want to be getting on top of that as soon as possible, any time of the year, but especially in December when I know, those timelines can be a little bit more compressed. So yeah, and it doesn't have to be in ZoomInfo, but any tools that are out there where you can find out, what's going on in your prospect's business, those can help you kind of understand if it, would be a good time to engage, from more of a prospecting perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like one of the big hot button topics that comes up a lot in women in sales, I see this on LinkedIn a lot too, is incentives to drive deals to close. And there is a lot out there about discounting, about different things, but you and I have talked behind the scenes about some of the other types of incentives you can use. So certainly you can speak to any discounting if you do apply that, but other types of incentives that your team and you as a leader are driving deals forward with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing from the leadership side that I would suggest, any leaders on the call do is, we like to make kind of a cheat sheet for like what we would call non-monetary gives. So, kind of bulleting out for our team, here's all the ideas on things that you can offer, before or in addition to a discount. And, what you're able to offer is going to be different for each company, but some of the common ones that we would offer at this time of year is giving a free month of service. So a 13-month contract for the price of 12.
Mm-hmm.
That, can help us get past the objection of anybody who's like, hey, we're just going to get started in January. We're January 1, we want to go live and get started. With that kind of objection, though, it is important to know, like, is that just a brush off by them and they don't really want to start on January 1? Because, it's just such an easy answer to give at this time of year. So again, we want to kind of understand, like, well, are you wanting to wait until January 1 because you're not going to be, doing any prospecting for the rest of this year? Or is it something else? Does it have more to do with budget or timing? The other nice part about offering the free month is that we can frame it as them onboarding with ZoomInfo on our dime. So they're not eating into their contract value during that time when they're really more just doing like the setup and training and integration type of stuff. Delayed billing, if that's possible at
Mhm.
your organization, is big this time of year. And that could be something as simple as just doing a net 30 on a payment, or putting down a percentage of their payment right now and backloading the rest into next year. Any type of like custom billing structure, just because it is kind of budgeting season. I usually find like November and then like early December is usually when companies are wrapping that stuff up. And so they might find out now what their budget is going to be for next year, but maybe like that budget doesn't actually open up for them to spend until February 1st. It's different for every company. So if you have the ability to provide flexibility with their billing schedule, that I actually think sometimes helps just as much or more than discounts. And you
Mhm.
have to make sure that your prospect is aware of that flexibility when you do start to get objections, because they don't know what we can offer. They might just have it in their head that they have to pay annually upfront to get access to the tool, and that's not necessarily the case. So we've got free month, delayed billing. Another one would just be thinking about like what kind of product add-ons could you give. For example, one that we like to do for new clients is free one-time CRM cleanup, so that they can start the
Mhm.
new year with clean data, actionable insights in their CRM. This is a time of year where sometimes companies have more time to work on those type of cleanup projects. So that additional users, maybe like a buy one get one user type of special can be good. And then finally, obviously there are discounts, and let's be real, if you're working for a software company, especially a publicly traded software company like ZoomInfo, it's not exactly a secret that we offer discounts at the end of the month or at the end of the year. There's a lot of chatter online about hey, it's a good time, here's the price I got, just wait until the end of the month and ask them. Like,
Mhm.
we know that stuff goes out there. So we are going to offer discounts. And, kind of similar to what I was saying about leadership, putting together a cheat sheet of non-monetary gives. It's also helpful to put together a cheat sheet for what kind of discounted pricing is available, because I want my team to know, like, by the back of their hand, what exactly is the cost, if it's 10% off, if it's 15% off, what are those exact prices, so you can be speaking in real numbers with your prospect on the call. I think that just helps, make things a little bit more real for them. And, coming in prepared with what your flexibility can be um, is really helpful. And like, I'm a big proponent of getting pricing out, as soon as possible in your sales cycle. Like,
Mhm.
in my opinion, there's no reason to like be stalling that and waiting. Like, I don't want someone doing like a 1 or 2 week trial. They have no idea what the pricing is, and then they come back at the end and we're vastly off of their expectations. So I think getting the pricing, and then this time of year getting the flexibility options just kind of all out on the table is a good move for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, lots of great ideas here. Not all of them, of course, discount 50% and call it a day, which is amazing. So, tons of good ideas here. Obviously, run those by your leadership team. Make sure you're allowed to offer those. But I think there are some really excellent ideas, and some of those we're deploying too. I love the early start date, giving people kind of like a courtesy month. That is a great opportunity, again, to your point, so they can use that time to onboard and not have it count against their contract. So, tons of good ideas there. Thank you so much. We're heading next into territory that you know well, and something that everybody's talking about as well right now, which is leveraging AI. So we're thinking specifically about this time of year, and I'd be curious to hear where and how your team is leveraging AI specifically for kind of this end of Q4 crunch.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI has honestly been huge for us in this kind of like re-engagement season and running re-engagement plays on prior opportunities. I think having a call recording tool, Chorus, Gong, there's a lot of like free and super low cost tools that you can use to record your sales calls. That's like the critical first step in being able to, do anything with AI, because we're not going to remember what somebody said on a call you had back in June. But if you have a call recording and you have a call transcript, you can use AI to, at scale, pull out what did your prospective clients say to you on those calls back in June. Did they say to reach back out at a certain time? They probably explained in detail what kind of pain points they were having or what their metrics were at that time. So if you have that data, then at the end of the year, we are using our AI tools to, feed in call transcripts and call recordings automatically, surface opportunities where, they had said something in the call that makes it worth revisiting now. And then AI is also able to help us write super personalized emails that are going to actually say specifically, hey, when we met in June, you said that your sales team was, spending 10 hours a week driving around, knocking on doors, trying to get in front of customers. And, you guys were trying to reach more CIOs in Dallas. How did the rest of the year go for you guys? Is that something you're still doing? Have you worked on your strategy at all? What are your plans for next year? That's just stuff that, like, it could technically be possible manually, but it would be so time consuming to try to figure that stuff out. And, like, I just think the coolest part about it is how, those really specific details that it can pull out of your calls. So at ZoomInfo, we have an internal AI tool. It's called ZoomInfo Chat, and it allows us to combine call recording data from Chorus with our Salesforce data, all of our activity history and emails, ZoomInfo data about what's going on at that company, and any just public online data that all kind of goes into one source, which is really powerful. And it's pretty similar to a new product we're launching called Go-to-Market Workspace. So we'll plug for ZoomInfo there. But again, like, a lot of this stuff at the service level can be achieved with just using any AI tool like a Chat GPT and feeding it call transcripts if you have those recordings. So I think that's kind of the first step to get down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we draw towards we're going to do about 10 more minutes together, and then we're going to pivot into Q&A. So if anybody has Q&A questions, this would be the time to submit those. And we would love to get to those at the end of our conversation here. We're going to pivot forward to another. I think these are kind of like our meat topics that are right in the middle here. A big one is prospecting. Even prospecting in Q4, but specifically prospecting in December is such a touchy subject because a lot of people just feel like it's a throwaway. Like, you might as well just wait until the new year, start prospecting then. But then you and I both know what happens. Now you started Q1 with no pipeline, and that's a tough start to the beginning of next year. So what's your philosophy for building pipeline towards the end of the year? And just take us through what you're thinking about for your team as far as prospecting this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, this is another question that, like, it is so dependent on who you sell to. We sell to salespeople. They are working in December. We know that they're mostly working, like, I'm probably not going to, cold call somebody on Christmas Eve, but otherwise, like, it's kind of full steam ahead for prospecting, with the audience that we're selling to, small business sales leaders, small business owners. If you're calling, high level IT people in manufacturing where they're closed down for the last 2 weeks of the year, obviously, be aware of that, and things are going to be a little bit different. But I do think for just about any industry and anything you're selling, like, it would be a huge miss for you and your team to kind of go into December with the mindset that, well, everyone's they're shutting down for the holidays. It's not a good time to do any outreach. Like, that would definitely be the wrong mindset. I've sold deals on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve every single year that I've worked at ZoomInfo. So those things are possible. Even when you are working on, like, larger, more strategic engagements, if you've been working those relationships all year long, like, I probably know exactly what days that person is going to be off leading into the holidays. Or, I probably have the relationship with them where they've told me before, hey, feel free to send me a text after work, or, feel free to text me on Friday. Even if I'm not here, I'll still let you know what's going on. So I think, like, as long as your prospecting messaging is tasteful, and again, like, we're not doing some crazy, 10 call campaign in the days before Christmas, like, there's really nothing to lose by, at least continuing to prospect, even if your engagement rates are going to be, a little bit down if your customers are less available at the end of December. But I would say, you kind of want to keep your foot on the gas. And obviously, like, we are starting to plan for next year too. So it is a good time to maybe towards the end of the year start identifying some bigger accounts that you want to try to break into next year. And again, there's no harm in starting to reach out to those now, and even maybe acknowledging up front that you'd like to, try to meet with them when the new year starts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with the topic of the new year, we're going to pivot to new year. And so I think what would be really interesting is to hear from you about, as a leader, how you sort of reset in the new year. So, at this point, we're kind of thinking a few weeks ahead. 2025 has drawn to a close. What are some of the first things that you're going to do after the first of the year?
Yeah. Well, my pro tip is always take off the first few days of the year. I think this year, New Year's Eve is not on a Wednesday. So, like that Thursday and Friday, the first and the second, that's a good time to recharge, take a breather, reset. If you haven't had a lot of time off, if December was crazy for you, those are good days to just kind of reset mentally. Hopefully, you're able to step away for a little bit. Um, but then once you're coming back in, again, that first, second week of January, like things do slow down a little bit. And so it's a good time for starting to reflect on the previous year. I like to kind of do a deep dive into the data from last year. So, like I said, I'm pretty data driven. So I do keep track of a lot of different metrics for my sellers. And so I'm going to be looking at things like, not only did they hit their quota, but you know, did they meet self-sourcing goals? How did they look for, in-month closes? What was their average sales price throughout the year? How did those things fluctuate? That's going to help me sit down and build a coaching plan with each rep. We'll meet together and we'll go over their data, kind of work on their coaching plan together. And then, think about what are their areas for personal growth this year? What are their goals? How can I support them in those this year? I want to get regular coaching sessions back on the calendar because those things probably, might have fell to the wayside a little bit in December with the craziness. So kind of reestablishing, schedules for the new year. And then I think it's also a great time to ask for feedback from your team, on what you as a leader, what could I do differently this year to help you? Are there things that I can start or stop doing? That would be beneficial in this year. And it can it can be awkward to ask for that type of feedback, on a random Tuesday in September, but it feels like a lot more natural to ask for that feedback, when it's New Year's resolution season and everyone's kind of like, clean slate starting the new year off.
Absolutely. Such good suggestions here. If you're in the audience too, let us know how you're going to reset starting 2026 too. We love hearing from all of you as well because we're here to learn too. So yeah, definitely let us know what you're doing as well. This next question is big. This is one that's come up in Women in Sales. It's something that oftentimes people will send me as an anonymous question because they don't want to ask in a public space. And so wanted to hear from you about how you coach reps who missed their target in 2025 or are coming off the heels of a really tough Q4 as they enter the new year. What is your approach? They know they missed quota, whether it was annual or quarterly or monthly, whatever that is. So take us through a little bit as a leader, what your approach is.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a tricky subject. I would say you need to kind of strike the right balance between like being positive and kind of having that, hey, we're going to shake it off type of attitude to also, being realistic and understanding, why was their target missed? And that's where kind of doing that deep dive into like some of the finer details of their metrics and what they were doing throughout the year is helpful. And then, I think it's just working together to kind of build their action plan for moving forward. We want to feel confident that we both together have a plan for how they're going to hit their goals in the new year. So, maybe there's some additional guardrails that need to go up. Maybe I say, hey, you actually didn't close a single self-source deal in the second half of last year. Why don't we make a plan that, this year, every week when we meet for our one-on-one, instead of just talking about your, top in-flight opportunities, why don't we set aside some time where we're also going to sit down together and talk about which accounts you're prospecting into? Maybe we'll go in and try to pull you a couple new accounts together. So we really want to set up like constructive steps on, a good plan moving forward. So I think it's, acknowledging that there was a miss, but then kind of keeping the conversation focused on what we're going to do differently moving forward and making sure that we have a good plan in place.
Absolutely. I love that because I think you have to be realistic. You have to own the miss. But I also think if you just harp on that, like it's going to demotivate that rep and that's not super healthy either. So I think striking that balance is excellent advice. I have a question that we're going to wrap on, but I'm going to pivot us now to the Q&A section because there's some really good questions that came in from some of our guests that are here today. So I'm going to read these out to you and then let me know if you have thoughts on any of these or ideas. The first one comes from Noelle, who asks, what leadership behaviors do you think will matter most in the coming year?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a tricky one. I think that For me, like the one thing that I like, it's so hard to stay in a consistent routine with is like more of that hands-on like call coaching and, sitting down and making sure that we keep time for giving that feedback. It's like the first thing to go as soon as it gets busy. And so I think like for me in the new year, that's going to be one of my goals is making sure that I do have regularly scheduled time to sit down with my team and like go listen to their calls together and talk about them. I don't know if anyone else has any other stuff, but that's just one that like it always just gets away. And, New Year's a good time to reset and get that stuff back on the books.
I love that. And Noelle made a really good comment. Inspect what you expect. I really like that. Or she's reiterating. So I really like that as a principle here. And I think let's see, there's some good questions coming in. So I'm trying to prioritize based on how much time we have. This kind of falls into one of the questions we talked about, but I almost wanted to frame it more as if this rep was coming to you directly with this question, how would you respond to them?
Mhm.
The question is, I'm going to miss my quota and I'm super scared. What should I focus on right now? Q4 or Q1? Basically, do I try to like scramble right now? Do I focus on next year? Where's my headspace? If your rep came to you and said this.
Yeah. I would say that, right now, early December, it's focus on Q4. Like absolutely focusing on is there anything else you can do to make an impact right now? Even if is there one additional deal that you can sell this month? That to me as a leader, like is what I would want to see you focusing on. Again, that's from an SMB perspective, but I think, something else I would tell you is, I had a leader at ZoomInfo who always said, if you're not hitting your quota, then then it's when we're going to look at KPIs. So it is, if you are, far behind on hitting your quota, what can you control? What can we focus on that is within your control? And that's your activity, your output, your attitude. If you are doing all the right things there and we can see that you're putting in the work and you're being strategic and, you're doing the activity and you're maintaining that positive attitude, that's going to go a long way with your leader versus somebody who's kind of just like, hanging up their hat and saying it was a tough year and they didn't get enough leads. And, we want to just see that you're continuing to put in your best effort and not let your foot off the gas this year.
Absolutely. Such a good way of looking at it. Shift to looking at KPIs, and leaders are going to look at that. So I think that's so critical. I think about, we had a rep years ago and he just missed revenue quota every single month, but his KPIs were crazy and he was just building an insane amount of pipeline. And eventually it struck and he actually like started closing and it all started coming through. But he had like a really rough first 9 months, almost a year, where we were like, he's definitely going to get fired. Like, but he was a really strong seller. So I do think there's absolutely something to be said. And if you're doing those activities, eventually it pays off. And it also, if you are doing all those KPIs, that's a good opportunity for your leader to look and say, okay, if they are doing all the calls, if they are getting this many deals in the pipeline, where are maybe the skill gaps? And then let's start to address those and look closer. But it gives your leader an opportunity to actually have something to work with versus, yeah, I missed my quota and I don't do my cold calls every day and my emails are behind. And, like there's more to look at. There's more meat there.
Right. And I think another thing I would add to that is like in the times like where I've struggled in the past when I was a seller, like I do think being extra communicative with your leadership is important at that time. Like I would message my boss and be like, I'm freaking out. I don't know how I'm going to hit quota. Like, can we have a meeting? We would sit down and like go through everything together. I'd walk away with a few, like, here's a few plays to run or things I didn't think of doing on these deals. Like, you want to be proactive and like ask for more help than you normally would. Hey, I just got this email. I'm not sure how to respond. Like, staying in close communication, that's way better than like just losing a loan and we just see your numbers aren't there, but you're also not asking for help. So I would, actually kind of amp up your communication at that time.
Very good. Yeah. And I think that's big because a lot of people would kind of want to shrink into a corner. So that is a really, really good call out. The next, I think our most upvoted question came from Heather Bell, who asks, how are you seeing AI and new tooling impact quotas and team capacity?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, on our team right now, like it hasn't impacted quotas or team capacity yet. I think at the phase that we're at with like, rolling out internal AI tools at ZoomInfo, more so what we're looking at is actually adoption from our teams. We've been challenged by our executive leadership all the way from the top, from our CEO, Henry, to make sure that we're adopting these internal AI tools that the company has invested in. And so right now, our primary focus is on driving adoption of those tools, seeing who's using those tools, making sure that our team knows how to use the AI. Like every week when I'm doing deal reviews with my team, like we're opening our internal AI tools together and we're kind of walking through different use cases for like how could it help you prep for a meeting? How can this help you identify 5 accounts you should focus on this week? How could this help us write a re-engagement email? I think that's kind of where we're at right now versus like, I don't think we're at a place yet where it's like, hey, everyone's quota is going up because AI is doing so much work for us and we're cutting headcount. Like it's more about how can we make our existing teams more efficient, more productive, but we are kind of still in that like rollout phase.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're gonna do one more Q&A question, and then we have one more question to wrap with you on. So this is, I think this is a cool one, and you'll know the answer to this. What's the top objection that your team is hearing right now, and then how are you kind of coaching them on combating it?
Yeah, I think this is maybe one we talked about a little bit earlier, but I think the objection this time of year is like, we're going to wait until next year. Hey,
Mhm.
this looks great. This is awesome. Definitely want to get started with this in the new year. Like, hey, let's talk again in January about how to pick this up. That's just what you always get at this time of year. And so, kind of coming back to what we were talking about earlier, like we really have to flush out, like, is that the real objection or is that just a blow off where it's just, hey, call me next year, hey, we're definitely going to buy this next year type of thing. Like, okay, but why? What's going on in your company
Mhm.
right now? Like, we need to understand what, from a sales perspective, what are they actually doing right now? Are there places where we could be bringing them benefits sooner? And if so, then, what's causing them to want to wait? Is it budgetary objections? Like, yes, obviously everyone's always going to say that it's expensive. So we're prepared to handle those ones. But I do think this time of year, it is more of like just the timing and like the blow off till next year thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's so critical that what's going to be different next year than what's happening today. Like that's just such an eye-opening because if the answer is just like I will have had a rest over the holidays and then come back renewed, that deal might not be going anywhere. That person just wants to kind of like push you off for longer. So I
Yep.
think any questions around there are going to be good answers for you to get better insight into the deals. So that is awesome. We are going to close out on something that I know you and I talked about as well, which is mindset and sales. We know mindset is everything in sales. It's super important. So as you're thinking about wrapping 2025 and moving into 2026, what energy are you bringing into 26? What are you kind of taking with you?
Yeah. So yeah, I really do think that mindset is everything in sales. Like focusing on what you can control is how you can make your own destiny in sales. And like there is no company, there is no sales job that is going to be perfect. I had a leader here at Zoom Info, like back when I first started, and he sat down, like, I had a close friend who worked here, another girlfriend, and we were always just talking about, hey, that was, we didn't like that, or that was stupid, whatever, just kind of like gossiping, being a little bit negative. And he really he shut that down so hard and just kind of nipped it in the bud and was like, what are you guys doing here? Like, this is not benefiting you. This is hurting the team. Like, this isn't going to help you sell more. You have to focus on what you can control and leave the rest. And like, I really adopted that mindset ever since because sales is a really tough job mentally. Like, it can really wear on you, and there are a lot of distractions. So, you cannot be spending your mental energy focusing on little things that are annoying you about your company or your leadership. Like, no organization is going to be perfect. There's going to be pressure. At times you're going to feel micromanaged, or you're going to have no management. You might not have marketing to help you with something. I can't get someone to go edit this pricing sheet. Sales is a job where you really have to control your own destiny and take matters into your own hands a lot. And if your mental state is in a good place, like that is really the first step to success. And your luck can change on a dime in sales. Like, you get
Mhm.
the right opportunity, the right lead falls into your lap, like you can make big money, but you got to be putting the right energy out there to attract those things, I think.
Absolutely. We are heading into 2026 protecting our energy together. I'll be right there with you. So I think this is fantastic. Thank you so much for all the insights, for the learnings. Make sure to connect with Serena on LinkedIn if you haven't yet. Follow some of her insights there. I dropped two more links, the Women in Sales Slack community and the interactive Zoom info demo. So check those out if you haven't. And we just finished, this is our very last Zoom info Women in Sales event for 2025, but we have a really cool program gearing up for 2026 together. So stay tuned. We're going to have a bunch more events, a lot of really tactical events, which we know you guys like. So stay tuned. We will see you in the new year. And thank you so much, Serena, for everything. And thank you, Zoom Info, for being an incredible partner to Women in Sales.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.